until we're on the record. Okay, it's 7 o'clock and it looks like we may have Brianna on the phone. So let's call the meeting to order. It's November the 29th, 2021. This is a GBOS special meeting regarding storm damage. Goodwood Board of Supervisors, committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 public meetings. Goodwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Goodwood Public Meeting Standards of Conduct. So we'll call to order now, do a roll call and disclosures. So my name is Mike Edgington. I'm co-chair and land use supervisor. Guy
Wade, fire department supervisor.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Jennifer Wingard, public safety supervisor.
Amanda
Sassy, road supervisor.
Thank you. And Brianna
Sullivan, Parks and Recreation, cemetery supervisor.
Thank you. So it sounds like the gang's all here and we have a quorum. Are there any disclosures? Okay, I'm not expecting any. So agenda approval. Would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve.
Thanks, Amanda. And a second?
Second.
Thanks, Guy. Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion or amendments. Let's go to it. Let's do a voice vote for this. So all in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, Margaret, did you have a?
I'm sorry, I was expecting maybe an addition to the agenda to discuss the fire department funding.
We won't have that. I resolved it today.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Perhaps you could just give us just in your comments, you can maybe give us an update, Kyle, to that then. Okay, so I didn't catch the vote, so let's go back through and just do a voice vote on this. So all those in favour?
Aye.
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 I think I heard everybody. And anyone against? Okay, sounds unanimous. Announcements. The public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussions stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. GBOS committees, that's Trails, Land Use, Public Safety and Cemetery, will hold officer elections at their first regular meeting in the new year. An election for GBOS Seat C will be on the ballot in April. Filing dates are January the 14th to January the 31st. We'll dive straight into old business. Number one is discuss the status of temporary repairs related to the fall storm. Kyle.
Sure. As you're well aware, we got through the repairs that we could do this year. Everything's open and operational. Last week before Thanksgiving, we were able to get through and get all the buildings from Western for the different repairs that they did. And so tonight I want to discuss that with you and basically get your approval to move forward with paying those invoices out of several different funding areas to make it happen. Overall, I was actually really pleased with the way the pricing came in. I thought it'd be more, but I think Western is a pretty reasonable contractor and they didn't gouge us, which is very common. You'll find in emergency situations that there'll be a lot more flexibility in pricing from the contractor side to maybe increase their costs as they see opportunity. which Western didn't do in this case, and I think that's really really nice of them. So with that, we basically got the majority of the work done. We still have probably about 100 to 150,000 left in work for spring, and what that will probably include is things like putting in the additional overflow pipe as designed by the hydrologist down on Ruan Road, repaving that section that got all torn up, so that we put a temporary pavement patch over that in the hopes of someday replacing it with something larger and more modern for a culvert through there. And then other things throughout the valley. You know, we on St. Moritz, we need to go up there and upsize the culverts coming down from Echo Ridge, because we upsized the culverts above that, but we couldn't get to those because of the freeze up and snow. And then out at the 5K, repairing quite a bit of damage that's happened in what they call the hammerhead turnaround out there for the fire department. That large erosion along the back bank there, tree came down, and so things like that. Just some larger things, but a bunch of small stuff and things that we probably didn't really see until we get a real chance to lay our eyes on it in the spring and everything melts out again. So I'm estimating within that range. But with the cost that we have incurred at this point for Echo Ridge, we had a total of labor and equipment there of $76,000. For Loveland, $16,000. For Ruane Road, $133,000. And you could divide the materials total probably by the different areas. We do have some excess material as we would, but not a lot. 108,000, and then trucking for all that material that was brought in and different materials that we needed for the project, 98,000. So those materials and trucking could be split percentage-wise and added back into to give us a solid cost on each of the different areas. One thing we didn't really pull out because it was really just like a day and a half worth, and we were doing two projects at once, was the repairs that we did do at the 5K parking lot and just some minor stuff that we did up on Crystal Mountain. Those were each about a quarter of a day, and the guys were already assigned to it, so we just lumped those into the Ruan Road repairs there. So they're pretty minor overall. So the total we're looking at there for just the construction cost is $143,326.91. And that's what is coming from the expenses for Western. And then beyond that, we have also what sometimes I refer to as the soft costs. We have a post-construction survey of Ruan Road, which the board approved at the last meeting for $37,000. And then we have Bate company project management. This includes the hydrologist. And then we had a on-site construction inspector who worked with me while the work happened on the Ruan. And then we also had engineered drawings produced. They're pretty minimal, but they were enough to give direction and guidance to the Western. And so that's $13,000. So total there, $50,530 in those expenses right there incurred in that aspect. Now that may not mean we're going to spend the $50,530, but that's what's encumbered, and we're still working out the billables with them for what they did. So they gave us estimates in advance.
Can I just ask a question on that? Has that work? So most of this work has been done, or all of the work in the soft cost has been done, but the billing may be inaccurate.
They were surveying all last week, and as soon as I gave the approval, they were out in the field surveying. They actually were walking through the creek because the middle section of the creek was still open, and so they're getting the depths through those areas. So yeah, they've gotten most of the field work done. They could have been out there today, but I didn't get down that way. But I know that they were trying to hammer out so that they could get that produced, and we would have that survey in hand for any design work that we might do this winter.
Okay. And since I stopped you, can I ask another quick question as well? Sure. The materials, is the majority of that, is the majority of that material for Rouen itself, or is it really split across all of them?
It's really spread out. A lot of material went back up to build a road base up on Echo,
Right.
and so there was a lot of 3-inch minus that went up there, and then all the ditch lining that went up Echo. They ditch lined the whole thing to slow water and better fortify the ditch. And they used crushed angular rock to go in there, so mostly like a granite type rock that went up that whole ditch line. In that aspect. So quite a bit of material was hauled over there and then capped it all off with wrap all the way to the top of the hill. So,
right. So we should see that as being split between Echo Ridge and Rouen, really.
Yeah. Like I said, you could probably take the percentages of what the material costs are and, according to what the equipment and labor costs were and apply that.
Yep.
Across it, because we did have to put a bunch of material back into Loveland. It wasn't a long stretch, but we had to rebuild a section of the road there and cap it with wrap, and then build up the banks there on the new fish culvert that went in.
Guy, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, thanks. Kyle, you might get into this later, but your estimate to 100 to 150K, you mentioned the overflow pipe on Rouen. I'm assuming that's coming in the spring, but that isn't the final cost of the road itself if we wanted to bring it up to standard.
If we wanted to bring it up to standard, you mean with a true fish pipe going in there?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that separately would probably be $1.5 to $2 million in its own. If we just keep the infrastructure that we have there, which at this point in time is the infrastructure that we're going to have, we probably won't be able to. Well, we strongly recommend that we put that overflow pipe in case we have another event like this, and those pipes are overwhelmed. They have at least a release valve, which probably could have helped in this case. Just having that larger, we had a oversized pipe up there just closer to the treatment plant. And
one more question, the upsizing of Echo Ridge for the upper culverts, was that planned anyway, or is that something that we need to do because of the additional work that we did lower of that? Is that what I understand?
So on Echo Ridge, we upsized from 18 to 24 inch. Just in response to the fact that seeing those 18-inch just completely fill, plug, and then cause that destruction on the hill. With the 24-inch, that if we were to have another event like that, they're oversized, so that would allow the water still to get over and into the pipe. Most likely, the way they rebuilt it, we shouldn't see that rock move like that. But if the roadbed surface eroded out, there's still the weak point of Echo Ridge is that as you go up the hill, all the driveways on the left pour their water out into the road, and then it cuts back around, and we try to grade it so the crown sends it back to the ditch. But if there's just too much coming out of that hill, the problem about that hill is you're catching all of Max's Mountain. It's shutting down, boom, it slams into a 90-degree angled road, and now it's being forced to go into a ditch where it wants to keep shedding all the way down to St. Moritz and then all the way down into Alpine Meadows down there. We end up with weaknesses in those driveways. So if we end up with the road eroding again because something blows out of one of those driveways that we can't control, well, at least we know these 24-inch pipes will do it. So that water travels all the way down Echo, then turns on to St. Moritz, and then crosses under Alpine Meadows, and then dumps into the green space behind Alpine Meadows and Vale. And so the two pipes on St. Moritz that it goes under, those are undersized right now, 18-inch. So we will we need to upsize those so that they aren't the weak spot now in the system. We have the pipe, so we bought the pipe. It's in our inventory now, so it's just a matter of installation.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want to keep going, Kyle?
I think what we are looking at is our revenue sources for paying this. So there's a couple things other here. This is what I have pulled out from going through the billing, and I think that we can get AWU to reimburse us for is about $20,000 worth of stuff, and these are things that we did specially for AWU in response to the Ruan washout. And one was setting the I-beam and getting that set up. That took several days. It actually delayed us waiting for that I-beam. The I-beam had been there, we probably would have had that project done maybe 2 or 3 days earlier. And then we had to backfill the road, 1 lane, get it open, let the pump truck get across, pump out the AWU plant, and then get back out. And then we had to re-excavate the whole hole again so that we could take out the second pipe. Whereas if we didn't have to do that, we just would have kept the hole and then got both pipes out and then just did 1 backfill, but we had to do 2 backfills. So close to $10,000 in extra work there. And then foam to insulate and labor to install, roughly $5,000 is what I could pull out. And then the crew had to put on these anodes onto the sewer pipe to prevent corrosion. And so that was another $3,500 of material and installation time. And then once again, pull that I-beam at the end of the project, which is fairly easy on the backside. But total there about $19,620 or close to $20,000. So I will work through Public Works Administration to get that reimbursement there. And also talk with administration just to see if they feel it should be larger, but that's direct cost that we saw related to AWU and trying to work with that sewer pipe. So as for funding to pay for everything, what is recommended is that we're gonna probably hit that bridge and dam area-wide fund first. It's a grant and they want to spend that up, so we'll use that portion of it. So bear with me as I do a little math here as we go. 856, so minus 163,800 leaves the service area with $320,056. So if we can get AWU to pay the $19,6020, that'll leave us with $300,436. So we will probably look at the 2 areas, the GBOS undesignated fund and the capital reserve emergency fund to cover this last $300,000 that remain to pay off the invoice. And so the one thing that we had in there and was part of my planning was that we were going to probably pull $100,000 from the undesignated fund to put it towards Engine 41. We just haven't done that because we haven't really had any progress forward yet on Engine 41. And so you could, but that would take us down to 200,000, and that's sort of the safe spot I've always advised the service area to stay in, is don't go below the 200,000 in your undesignated fund, just because of incidents like this. And so we'll pretty much drain that account, and then we'll probably jump in there to do that, take out the rest of the capital money out of the capital reserve to pay for it. So yeah, so between those 2, they will have to provide the funding to take it back. I'm trying to stay away from the Gerwood service area road capital account, as we have money tied towards that for our our fish passages on Alyeska Creek. I want to keep that project going while we have this hydrologist still working and not retired, and get that wrapped up and get that done this year, because I like to spin that project back into our maintenance program with Western and get them to give me a bid on those projects, because they're very capable of doing this and they can knock it out for us, and we can hopefully get those weak spots in the drainage taken care of. So anyways, that's where we stand at this point.
Could we hold off the discussion for how to cover the costs and how to pay for it to our 3rd item, because we still have, I think the first item was going to cover the costs we've incurred so far. Second item is going to be talking about the permanent solution and the estimate for that, and then we can move on to how we pay for things.
Sure. Yep, that works.
So are there any questions on the costs we've incurred so far? If not, we'll move on to item 2. It's any questions from anybody from public or
I just have
please go
one.
ahead.
This is Brianna.
ahead,
Thank
Brianna.
you, Mike. Before Ruan, the AWU chart, I just had a question, and I think Kyle explained it, but it says though all those costs are in the Western invoice, but they are not including materials. Is that correct?
No, they include the materials. So you'll find the foam and the anodes within their invoices too.
True. Okay. I think that was all then. Just looking at the AWU one.
Okay. All right, so let's move. So item number 2 is to discuss the final restoration of Rouen, so the longer term solution.
Yeah, so there we are looking at a $1.5 to $2 million project to rebuild that fish passage, rebuild that drainage with a fish passage standard box culvert that would go in there. That would alleviate a lot of the pressure that drainage sees during high water events. It would also probably avoid what we experienced with this one, where it got plugged with a log. When you have 2 culverts that are undersized, that's always a factor. The log that plugged this one would maybe just make it through the culverts that we put in there now because they're round, but it could always get itself sideways. So it still doesn't resolve it. But a good box culvert would be the ultimate goal to go in there, and the hydrologists and the engineers both agree with that.
And that would also restore a natural base to the for fish as well, wouldn't it? Which we did not have previously.
Correct. No, we did if anything, we did improve the passage a bit because we lowered the angle of the pipe so that the water isn't rushing through there like a waterfall. But no, a box culvert would create the ultimate fish habitat in there with a natural bottom. A good box culvert example here in Gerwood, 2 of them, or 3 of them actually. There's 2 on Olympic Mountain Loop, where the Alyeska Creek crosses under there, and then also the 2 out there on the 5K, which are box culverts, and on the Alberg Extension Road. They're very nice and work great, and they do great during floods.
Okay. Is there a risk? Or maybe it's an opportunity, I'm not sure. Is there a risk it would be seen as a significant upgrade rather than just a repair for the purposes of securing funding? Or is that fine?
I would say it's a repair. It's an inadequate system.
Right, okay.
The system that needs to be repaired and improved. And so, I definitely see it as a repair that's needed for the drainage. And it's something that we were very lucky for many years, but it finally got us. And so I think we'll be buying time with the culverts that we put in now.
Okay. And have there been, I know at some point, I think the administration suggested there could be a bond, but I think they were talking about an answer bond, which obviously we could not be spent on that. Has there been anything at all from Public Works or suggestion about how that gets paid for?
Well, the one item that they've talked about this is emergency accesses funding. So there's an area-wide bond that covers for emergency access and establishing basically secondary access to a lot of like dead-end roads. I think the Hillside most recently did something like this, and it passed and was provided a connection between 2 dead-end roads. And so there may be some flexibility. There's vagueness written in that. So there may be some possibility to make this work here. I think PME was going to look into that and try to find that out. So, I think that's on our to-do list to discuss here.
And would that be in a time scale where it could be applied to next April?
Well, that's something I'll find out in the coming days. It may be, they may have to do more of a shot in the dark with a quick estimate. They do have good practical estimates in Anchorage where they've done these fish culverts. They just did a big replacement, and I forget which road it's on, if it's on Tudor or Lake Otis, but they just did a fix like this. Maybe it was on Northern Lights, and so they have that experience. Those culverts are much longer and bigger, but they can probably work off of that to come up with something to put to a bond. There's a lot of talk about a bond holiday going on right now at the administrative level, so we don't know what's going to happen, and I know there's a bit of sense of urgency with that at the operational level, knowing that there may not be bonds next year. So.
Yeah, that was my other point, and I know at the last assembly meeting, the mayor made a big point of saying he would like a bond holiday, so it may not be an option to us. Guy.
Yeah, just this is essential fish habitat, so there is a federal nexus, and I don't know if there's any opportunities to leverage federal funds for something maybe out of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They have a big fish passage program as well. So.
Well, we've been doing that, and thanks, Brianna. She's done a lot of outreach to the different sort of managers of federal funds for fish habitat, one being the Kenai Watershed, and we're in touch with them about it. The U.S. Forest Service is putting a lot of their resources into keeping us aware of any type of funding coming. And this infrastructure bill that is coming now from the feds has a whole section on it for fish passages. So we're trying to keep our ears down to see if we can get our name on a list. I think the state level will be really important to get them involved so that they understand the need for this. So yeah, I think those areas we're trying to tackle. But if you hear them up or see them, please pass them along. And Margaret dove into a bunch of them today. One we just missed, finished in October. There's another one that opens in April, but quite a few of these are matching grants, so it's 1-to-1. So you would have to come up with 50% of the costs to make it work, and so that still puts the service area at a stretch trying to raise that money.
Sure. Most of the essential fish habitat projects I've been involved with, they ADF&G certainly has their ear, okay, because they're the local experts. So I don't know if they're involved with this, but their habitat biologist could probably speak to it and be a good liaison for us if need be.
Yeah, yep, and we've reached out to Julian, and she handles a lot of the ADF&G grants and fundings, and so she's aware of it. And we need to meet with Fish and Game, and we're waiting for the survey so we can give them a survey of what's been put in there so that they can be aware of that for their inventory, and probably still mark it as inadequate and keep applying the pressure towards the muni to address it like they did with the old culverts.
Thank you.
The timescales for all of these, even if we manage to get it on the bond proposition for April, sound like there's no real chance of construction next year, though.
No, I would say not. We don't have a design in place.
Right.
We would need a design that usually takes 3 months, 4 months just to get a design, go through all the steps of review. And then we have a design and then going out for construction. Most like anything, as I've always advised, we don't like to bid in close to the summer season because at that point, a lot of contractors, the ones you want, have gotten their work. And then they'll, if anything, you end up with a contractor that's not so experienced, or you end up with a high bid, and then it gets way more expensive. Whereas we can bid things in January, contractors are more hungry, and they sharpen their pencils when they go after these bids.
Okay. So the $1 million question, or the $1.5 million question, I guess, is how long do you think the current repairs can be in situ before we have them? The risk gets untenable.
But that's just a prediction of the weather, really.
Yeah.
Get another
projection.
Well, let's talk about British Columbia right now. They're getting another
Yeah.
river coming in this week, and if we continue to see these storms like this, October is our worst month by far. The hydrologist did the analysis of flood levels, and October tends to be our most severe month. And then we tend to see more favorable until April. And we'll have some storms that roll through April, and then it settles down again until the fall. So it's always those fall storms that come in, but we've been seeing fall-like storms in spring too. So it's just a matter of, those other culverts held up for 30-something years. These are a little bit larger in capacity. They're round, so they probably will handle water a bit better. But they're still undersized, and so that's always a factor. So that's why we really, not knowing when this $1.5 million is going to come, $2 million to make this work, we really feel we should put that overflow pipe in just to keep ourselves. So because such critical infrastructure lays on the other side of that pipe, we just can't really go through that again. So as much as we can avoid it with what we got right now, we'll try to do that. The other thing that wasn't with the last build was it wasn't very well fortified at the upper levels of the dike. And so this time, and we have a bunch of rock that we still need to put in, but we got a bunch of rock in before the winter set in, is really armor that upstream bank so that if water is churning there again, it's not eroding exposed dirt. It's really hammering against that rock, which is protecting the bank side. So we'll try to fortify it as best we can so that it finds hopefully it doesn't find a weak spot there and take it out again.
Okay, so any other questions on the topic of the permanent fixture oil? So is that your hand up from earlier, Guy, or is that a new question?
Sorry about that.
No, fine. Okay, so let's move on to the item number 3. So how do we cover the costs? Review options for covering cost of restoration. And I think you've already started to discuss this. Kyle, is there anything more you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I think our suggestion is that we use the Bridge and Dam Fund. We use the mixture of the GBSA, undesignated fund, and the capital reserves. What will be now put back on the service area is to replenish that capital reserve fund. The undesignated fund is not required. That's money beyond our required reserves. But whatever money, so what I would probably say at this point is that we use up all the undesignated fund, and then the remaining portion comes from that capital reserve fund. And then either through a special assessment for 22 or through some other realigning funds or reducing operating budgets, we backfill that capital reserve fund. But that'll have to happen in 22 so that we're not affected. As you can see at the city level right now, that was one of the reasonings for the decrease in the bond rating was the capital reserve wasn't fully full, but that's a requirement of us to have that full.
Yeah, I think we don't need to go into the fiscal details of that, but I mean, some of that was the mismatch from the CARES money coming through. But,
correct. Yeah.
I'm sure John could give us far more detail about it. So I guess my question for you is, my understanding is there's a couple of things that, although we haven't formally moved the money, we had already allocated within the undesignated fund. So one of those items was the costs, the additional costs for the fire truck, and don't we also have some money in there that we would typically move as capital contributions to Parks and Recs, roads, and fire department? Isn't that resting in the undesignated fund or not?
That doesn't that rests in the capital fund, and then
Okay.
Operating budget, and then we move it to capital. So that's where those
Right.
funds came from. But we had money that through one of the years when the fire department had to use their capital funds to balance their operating budget. We've had I think maybe 2 years where not all that money was used, and it fell into the undesignated fund.
Right.
So when it was time to go and get that that engine, I was going to propose that we pull 100,000 out of the undesignated fund to go towards the engine, so we're not paying so much on the loan for the repayment of that engine. But at this point in time, I think this is in front of us right now, so I would recommend that we use that so we're not drawing down that capital reserve fund, emergency fund, too much.
I believe there was another aspect for the fire department as well, for the fire truck, of the equipment that's needed on it. So the rescue equipment, I believe, is not was not funded from the source we expected. So
Correct.
That's now going to fall upon us.
Correct, and yep, and that I know that the fire department's trying to figure out how they can make that work through area-wide funding, because that's part of Rescue 41, which is not a service area responsibility.
Okay. I think I'm confusing two things then. There was the Rescue 41, but I thought there was also some aspect about the fire truck itself that we were looking for additional funding from the undesignated fund. So was that just cost of the original purchase that you've already discussed?
We don't know what the cost yet is on Engine 41, because the details are still being worked out and the bids are still being collected on that. So as to what additional equipment may be needed for that, I mean, there'll be probably ladders and hoses, but that would be something we would have to consider in the overall total cost for that apparatus.
Understood. Michelle?
Hi there. Yeah, everything Kyle's saying is correct. The equipment was extrication equipment for Rescue 41, which is area-wide, versus Engine 41. So, yep, all good. And the delay is just because with COVID, manufacturing is behind, getting quotes is behind. We just finalized the quotes on Rescue 41 for 35%, so we're still behind in everything. So, but there's manufacturing issues going on right now. So all good at this point.
Are we likely to see those quotes in time for the first quarter budget revision? So really, we're talking about January time, end of January.
I think we'll probably won't see the finalized quote, just judging on how many months it took us to get the Rescue 41 quote. I think we probably won't see an Engine 41 quote until April or May.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or discussions? If not, we can move on to a motion.
This is Brianna. I have a question.
Please go ahead, Brianna.
Kyle, did I understand you correctly? With the undesignated fund, you really like to keep it above 200,000 all the time?
In a normal year, yes. But in this case, it mostly for things like this. So,
right.
You know, as we build back that undesignated fund, I think a goal for us is to get it to 200,000, and then from 200,000 up, I would probably say then that can be used for moving to capital purchases. So yeah, in a normal year, but in this case, that's why that money's sitting there. It's ready to go. It's our rainy day fund, and we should use that first.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to order in my mind which funds should be moved first for the motion.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Guy and then Amanda.
Yeah, I don't see on the agenda there. So reimbursement from the state, where are we at on that?
No,
Is that even an option?
we have not heard anything back. So the letter that you sent requesting that, we have not heard a response from that at this time. So I guess you could say no news is good news at this point.
I don't think we can quite say that. I think no news is no news. It has been made clear to us that the state will not make a declaration without the Muni's request. So although they don't need the Muni's request, they won't do it unless they get the request from the Muni. So if the mayor doesn't make the request, we won't get anything.
Well, one more question. Moving funds from capital into undesignated, if we use that, is that possible at a later date if we need to?
So reversing it back from the capital back into the undesignated?
Yeah.
We typically don't do that because once it goes into capital, then it's locked in capital, and it's that if we don't use that money towards this project, then it'll just stay in capital. And then if we want to use it for something else, I'll have to get the board's approval. The only reason that we may move it back is to replenish the reserve account so that we meet our requirements there. But I wouldn't say we move anything back undesignated. We'll just have to rebuild up the undesignated by having surplus budgets each year, and so every year we usually have like a 5 or 6% surplus. Some years we break even. Last year we went over a little bit just because we had a large winter, like what's going on right now in the fall. So no, I think undesignated just slowly builds over time to get it back up there.
Thank you.
Amanda?
Kyle, thank you. Kyle mostly just answered it. I was going to ask about how long it takes to rebuild the fund. And I guess it's mostly based on if we have any extra left over at the end of the year. But Kyle, I'm not super versed. What's about 5% if we ever do go back to that?
Like in the roads budget, that may be 50,000 that we had excess. Parks budget, that may be 20, maybe 15,000. Fire department, usually fire department, it's like their surplus is like $5,000 or $6,000 that might fall down because most of the money, the largest item in the fire department is the contract fee that goes to the nonprofit, and then their maintenance costs get sucked up pretty quick with just repairs on the apparatuses. So usually not a big one there. And then the Whittier Police Department, there's barely anything because that budget's so slim because all we're doing is really paying the contract costs. So yeah, it takes a while in that aspect. And most of the time, it's the road budget that helps to build if we have a light winter, we have a light fall in particular, then we'll see surpluses there and they drop down into the undesignated account.
Thank you.
I had one other question which I meant to ask earlier, and then we'll go to Jerry. So the question I meant to ask earlier, in previous discussions, there were a couple of things that came out from the event which we should treat as a higher priority than we probably have. So obviously one of those is the culvert replacement on Alaska Creek, and the other thing is a drainage study. So they're both things potentially we can do this year. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And the only source for that would be road capital and undesignated. So I think we need to keep that in mind when we discuss moving stuff around.
Correct. And those two are on my list for each. So yes, I agree with you.
Okay. Any other questions from supervisors? If not, we will ask Jerry. Please go ahead.
I just have a question. You said no news is no news from the mayor. Nobody at the mayor's office has told you whether they would declare an emergency or not? That seems strange. Or they've said they're not going to.
No, there's been no response to the letter. So no official response to the request from the GBOS. So yeah,
Would it make sense for somebody to ask? I mean, John's on here.
I've left a message and it hasn't been returned before the holiday with the municipal manager.
Yeah, that's what I suggest.
Would John Welton have any suggestions?
Hi there. Yeah, I will contact Amy as well and find out, because I got your letter and I just kind of figured she would deal with it. I mean, so you just simply never heard back?
Yeah, we've heard nothing.
And that was over a week ago, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Wow.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I'll follow up. And try to find out. And I mean, you were just asking for a declaration of emergency, and that opens the door for the state. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So as we will discuss, the alternative is it's paid for by Goodwood taxpayers. At least the costs for this event. We still haven't got a mechanism for paying for the permanent repairs to Rouen. And I should point out that a lot of Goodwood taxpayers does not mean people living in Goodwood. Most of the money actually, or most of the property taxes, comes from people living elsewhere in Anchorage, who have second homes here. That's the largest component of our property tax. I haven't split it into which districts yet, so but we can do that.
Okay, I'll look into that.
And I assume there's no other likely sources of funding at the municipal level for any of this.
Well, nothing obvious. You know, I think you talked about the emergency roads thing, and we did one. Mountain Air was fairly, you know, I think we just bonded for the match, but that was a couple $1 million. I expect $1.5 million plus. But that has to get on the bond, and I think a bond holiday would be up to the. I mean, America proposed that, but I think ultimately it's up to the assembly to decide what goes on the ballot. And you know, something that's really an emergency fix seems like that's appropriate. So, but that's a discussion to be had. We have to decide first week of January what goes on there.
Yes.
But I wouldn't write that off. I mean, I do. This was not quite what was in our head when we thought about that emergency, making that area wide. But I think this would qualify. So that's potential. But and who would pay? It's area wide, you know.
Yeah, if it qualifies, that would be for the future permanent replacement. It would not cover the costs we've incurred so far. That's my understanding.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and you know, it would have to pass on the ballot, and it would be because
Yeah.
it's its own service area. It would be its own thing hanging out there, you know. So that's all, as you know, is a challenge.
Yeah, although it would be an area-wide service, but it would be still an area-wide payment.
Area-wide payment, but you know, if
Yeah.
they say, oh, to fix something.
But
in
it's a new
Gurdon,
proposition. Yeah.
so that's a challenge.
Okay. So I think did you have any other questions, Jerry? Or comments?
No, other than just keep looking for funding, you know.
Yeah.
I don't really have any. Thanks, John, for just trying to get an answer for us.
It wasn't much of an answer.
Thanks, John. So I think we're at a position now where we're probably looking for a motion. So I'd entertain a motion. Or Brianna can take the chair and I can make a motion, whichever you prefer.
I'm happy to take the chair, Mike, if you have one ready.
I have one ready, or I have one in my head at least. So I would move that we pay for the payments, first of all, from the Bridge and Dam Area-Wide Fund, then up to effectively 200,000 of the undesignated fund to leave 98 in there, and then the remainder from the capital reserve.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Great.
And
Thank you,
I'll explain why I do it that way. I think my recollection is the drainage study, which we probably need to do to prioritize any other work, is of the order of 80 to 100,000. So if we at least leave some money in the undesignated fund, we have the possibility of releasing that and going ahead with that as soon as we can get it done. And then we're not touching road capital because that's going to be necessary for the culvert replacement, which we know is a priority. For the culvert replacement, I should say, on Alyeska Creek, which we know is also a priority. And we got away with this time, but we wouldn't have done under slightly different circumstances. And then we will have to discuss how to replenish the capital reserve, which we'll need to do in the next tax year.
So, Mike, one thing you may run into is trying to leave that 98,000. I think by code, that 98,000, if it's not used from the undesignated fund, will be sucked right back into that reserve because.
Okay. So in that case, can I make an amendment? So I would amend my motion following is we move 98 from undesignated into road capital for the purposes of making sure we have money to cover the projects which we think are incredibly important,
Okay.
based on this event. And then we pay So there's two things going on here. One is to move 98,000 to the road capital fund, and then we pay the cost from the bridge and dam area wide fund first, the undesignated fund second, and capital reserve third.
Okay.
Does the second
Okay,
accept that modification?
Guy, do you accept that amendment?
So that would deplete our undesignated fund as far as, but we would retain it, 98,000 of that, and then the rest would come from capital reserve and dam and bridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we'd move 98 out of undesignated fund into road capital. So road capital would be just over 200, which will give us the capacity to pay for a drainage study and at least a chunk of the work for Alyeska Creek, which we know are priorities. And then we would drain bridge and dam area wide fund first, followed by the undesignated fund, followed by capital reserve to pay the emergency costs.
Probably a question I should have asked earlier. Are there any issues if we do get reimbursed of where these funds can be reallocated?
If we do get reimbursed, it'll go to our capital fund. So like, for example, with the pedestrian flashers, our reimbursements have now gone back into our capital fund because we used money out there from Parks and Rec to pay for those. So that's where the money will end up. Like for example, usually a reimbursement takes 2 years. So the area wide or the service area will be responsible for getting that capital reserve probably full refilled this coming year 22 to make it work. So we may not see a reimbursement in time to pitch it over to the capital reserve fund.
Answer your question, Guy?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I would like to retain some of that if we do put in road capital and we have that in our account. That seems the most practical way to go. So I agree with that amendment.
Okay. So Kyle, do we need to vote on the amended motion only?
I think
No
he did.
discussion.
Yeah, I think the original motion was amended by Mike and it was seconded by Guy. So I think you can go to a final vote.
Okay. I don't know if there are any other hands up.
No, they're not.
We'll call on them. Okay. I will call for a vote then.
Okay. Mike Edgington.
Yes.
Guy Wade.
Yes.
Brianna Sullivan.
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard.
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
That motion as amended passes 5-0.
Okay.
Mike, you can have the chair back if you'd like.
Thank you.
Before we move off that topic, because this relates, I did get a phone call the day before Thanksgiving from the municipal assessor, and he's going to be attending our next meeting to give us an update again. Basically, assessments are going to go up double digits, anywhere between the 10 to 12 on homes. And so I asked him, I said, is this normal? And he says, no, I've never, but that's what's going on in Gerwood. It's what your market is showing. And so, so the assessments on homes will be going up again. Now, what does that mean? I think silver lining in this is that it gives us more room within our mill cap because we have a larger assessment now that we're working off of for the valley. So timing may be good when we have to do a special assessment to refill these capital reserves. So he'll be giving us more information at your regular meeting on the 20th.
And I don't think, I know you use the term special assessment. I don't think we'll actually need to do anything we won't need to do anything over and above the tax cap. It'll be just an additional adjustment potentially to refill the capital reserve.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, it's not good news because the majority of the taxes we're paying are school district, so they go up anyway. Our mill rate goes down to compensate for the assessment going up.
Correct.
but the overall payment people are making will go up because of the school district being a fixed value, and maybe area-wide as well, depending how that settles out. Okay, so one follow-up question I have is, are we likely to see, so we're going to have to go through the first quarter budget revision process in like January, I believe. So by then we'll probably have clarification on whether a bond is likely or not for the permanent repair. I hope we will also get clarification on whether AWU is compensating for some of the work we did on their behalf, and we will have hopefully final numbers on the other 50,000 for the soft costs. So we should have a hard number by then of exactly how much our capital reserve is going to be depleted by.
Definitely by January, because we need to pay all our bills by, we like to have them all paid by the end of December. That's when our fiscal year ends. Yep. We have what's called month 13, which is January, but we're usually just paying the bills for December. But, you know, the Director of Public Works, Lance Wolberg, gave us this timeline so that we can be efficient to pay all our bills in December. So we'll be going to the Assembly, which will probably take a 2 meeting. And so once we get approval out of the Assembly, then we'll get those bills paid, which will be the end of December. So by January regular meeting, and that's when I start the first quarter revision talks with you, I'll have those solid numbers.
Yep, that makes sense. And I hope we have more clarity on the option of a bond for next year.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or thoughts on this topic before we move on to item number 4? Okay, we'll move on to, so thanks very much, Kyle, for putting this all together. I know this is a lot of work, and thank you to the contractor as well for splitting things down into, you know, details.
Correct.
And for all the work, but just for the accounting, thank you. Okay, so item number 4, discuss meeting topics for the GBOS LUC joint meeting on December the 20th at 6 p.m. So far we have status of hybrid, virtual, and in-person meetings, return to regular meetings, and requirements to move items from new to old business. Is there anything else we should add to that agenda?
We don't have anything else for you. We just wanted to see if you guys had anything more. If not, your approval for it so we can get it posted.
Any other thoughts from supervisors or the public?
This is Brianna.
Amanda.
I have one.
Oh, Brianna, then Amanda.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you, Mike. For land use, they keep circling their land acknowledgement statement. Do we know if they will keep it on their agenda or just suggest that it gets looked at?
I'll address that a little bit because staff, we've been working with it. I think what's lacking with that topic is somebody who is really embracing the process to create it. You know, they land use officers attended the training on it, and I think the biggest thing that they walked away from that was the strong responsibility of creating a land use acknowledgement was to understand it and maybe have some sort of connection with it, and I think people were afraid to stumble into that and do something wrong. So we haven't found any volunteers who have been really strong to take that on at this point. So at this point, it has been basically pended until either one of the officers take it on or somebody, a member of land use, which, you know, is, you know, any of the qualifying members wanted to take on that and then propose something back to the group. So that's where we stand at this point.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. I was curious also because a lot of us were on that 2-hour training. It's almost been a year since then, so I was hoping, but thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're proposing Brianna, actually adding it to the agenda, but I would be, if you were, I would be supportive.
Okay. I don't mind adding it to the agenda, so we could at least suggest it. It's been brought up in our community, and I don't talk to everyone in our community, but I'm sure they would be supportive. So I'll add it.
I think Amanda had her hand up earlier, and then Jennifer does now. Did you have something to add, Amanda?
No, thank you.
Okay. Jennifer?
Sorry, just a quick question about the land use acknowledgement. I thought it stalled out a little bit because there wasn't a historical basis for, like we weren't sure exactly what to acknowledge, but did I miss that? Like that we don't have some of the same historic usage in the Girdwood area, at least not that we can find anywhere documented at all.
I agree with you. That was part of the discussion. By not having a direct tie to Gerwood. But I think it was also recognized that Gerwood's part of the region and that maybe they didn't reside here, but Athabascans did move through here, but there's a lot of unclarity, and I think that is one reason that people hadn't really dove into it, was just a lack of information that they were obtaining to maybe write something that related to the region.
Amanda?
I actually have contact with an archaeologist that goes fossil hunting for fun and found something in kind of old Girdwood area, the DOT lot kind of area, suggesting that there were native people that moved through this region. Maybe that was some of the only land that really exposed, I'm not sure. And I can get whoever in contact or get him his contact if they're interested in learning more.
Thanks, Amanda. My comment is we do have a at the end of Carulius, there's at the beginning of the Iditarod Trail, there is a sign there that does go into some detail about land use in the past. I don't know who did the research for that, but if that still stands, it must stand up enough that it went on a recent sign. So if that research could be shared at least, although the information, obviously that's a summary on the sign itself, but the work that went on behind the scenes, I think would be valuable to share.
Yeah, and that was Kate and Barb who did that work, and they worked with Alaska Native Heritage Center and Andrew Leggett.
Okay, so we do have some fairly recent work then that went into looking at the land use, the historical land use of the area. We can bring that up at the joint meeting. Okay, any other items that we should put on there? If not, do we actually, I don't think we need a motion, do we? I think we can make agenda changes as a staff action.
Yep, we're just looking for your direction, so I think we got it.
Okay, great. Okay, anything else on that topic? If not, we will move on to public comment. Persons offering public comment must state their full name and address. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person and must be on subjects not listed on the agenda. Would anyone like to make a public comment? The few members of the public who are left. Laurie, please go ahead.
Hi, been a while. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. In light of the hydrologist reports, oh, by the way, I'm local, been around for a long time, Laurie Trick. Okay. In light of the hydrologist report and pending assessment of this latest storm and flooding event, I would like to know if there's any consideration within the board and the municipal employees and people that are paying attention to this and putting in their 2 bits about mitigating our creek beds with the removal of debris, sediment, and gravels that are building up. And it doesn't take a hydrologist to realize that the creek beds are filling up. And how do we best use our money that is cost effective to improve the flow of water and to prevent it from flooding in the future? It just seems like a common sense approach. And of course, I'm fish friendly and embrace Fish and Game to help with this. But it just seems when you stand on Glacier Creek Bridge and you look north or south, the area, the main channels are, you know, there's a birch forest, there's a alder forest growing up in the middle of it. And it wasn't like that for years. They used to mine gravel out of the creek for years. And I don't know why that is not in the discussion, or I would hope it would be. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Brianna.
Thanks,
I'll
Brianna.
second.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.